Texas Rangers fight Comanche. Shovel Mountain 1870. Bold tactics prevail Comanche. Comanche, the shrill cry pierced the air. Signaling danger was closer than anyone had imagined. A lone man, naked, bloodied and frantic, came charging toward the Texas Rangers, screaming at the top of his lungs. Behind him, the furious pursuit of 100 Comanche warriors grew louder with every second. The Rangers were vastly outnumbered. But what happened next would turn the tide of the entire battle. How did they manage to defeat the relentless Comanche and reclaim the stolen horses? Stay tuned to discover how this intense clash unfolded. Subscribe to Native Legends and History Stories now. In the summer of 1870, Central Texas buzzed with tension. Just 25 miles west of Austin, near the small town of Dripping Springs, a group of Texas Rangers moved fast across limestone-strewn meadows dotted with oak and cedar patches. The blistering sun beat down on their backs, soaking their practical hill country outfits, tough jackets, wide-brimmed hats, and high boots. This was no leisurely ride. Numbering just over a dozen, about 25 men, they scanned the ground for tracks, their Colt revolvers and repeating rifles gleaming at their sides. Their target, a band of Comanche, roughly 125 strong, who'd been tearing through local ranches, stampeding cattle, slaughtering livestock, and making off with around 100 horses. Word of these raids had reached the Rangers fast, and now they hunted for any sign of their quarry. The Comanche weren't just any threat known. As the lords of the southern plains, they'd built an empire that once stretched across the Southwest, fueled by unmatched horsemanship and ruthless raids. By 1870, though, that empire was crumbling. The Medicine Lodge Treaty of 1867 had forced many onto reservations, and white settlers kept pushing into their lands. Yet here on the Texas frontier, they remained relentless. Even a few miles outside Austin, Comanche war parties struck with alarming regularity, a stark reminder that their decline didn't mean defeat. Not yet. Historians debate their numbers at this point, but 125 warriors fit the pattern of large, desperate raids as their way of life slipped away. For the settlers, every stolen horse was a blow to survival. For the Comanche, it was a lifeline. Leading the Rangers was Captain Rufus Perry, a grizzled veteran at 48 years old. Born in Alabama in 1822, he'd moved to Bastrop, Texas with his family in 1833. Perry cut his teeth in the Siege of Bexar in 1835 and rode with legends like Samuel Walker, Bigfoot Wallace Henry, and Ben McCullough and Jack Hayes. Decades of fighting Comanche had sharpened his instincts, and now he squinted across the rugged terrain. His voice low but firm. "Keep your eyes sharp, boys," he said, reins tight in his hand. "They're close, I can feel it." Older than his men by a wide margin, Perry carried the weight of experience, his weathered face a map of every skirmish he'd survived. Among the riders was Frank Payne, a lanky kid from Austin, barely out of his teens. Most of the group hovered around 22, but Payne stood out not just for his youth, but for his past. Back in 1866, at 12 or 13, he'd tangled with Comanche during a cattle hunt northwest of Austin. That brush with death hadn't scared him off. Earlier in 1870, he'd signed on with the Rangers, starting at Camp Saba Springs near present-day Coleman, Texas, before word of these raids pulled his unit south. Now he rode near Perry, his young eyes darting over the landscape, rifle ready for Payne. This wasn't just duty. It was personal. As the Rangers neared Shovel Mountain, a hulking rise about 6 miles south of what's now Marble Falls, the air shifted. A faint sound cut through the wind. A man's voice crying out in English. The words weren't clear, but the panic was. Perry raised a hand, signaling the group to slow. Horses snorted, hooves crunching limestone. Then from around a bend, a figure staggered into view. A white man stark naked running for his life. "Comanche, Comanche!" he yelled, his voice cracking as he stumbled toward them. Behind him, the distant whoops of warriors grew louder, a chilling promise of what was coming. This wasn't just another patrol. The Comanches' raids weren't random acts of violence. They were a defiant gasp from a culture, fighting to hold on. The Rangers, outnumbered and far from reinforcements, embodied the other side, a frontier government scrambling to impose order. Historians often frame these clashes as simple, good versus evil tales, but the reality was messier. The Comanche fought for survival, the Rangers for control. And as that naked man crashed into their ranks, both sides barreled toward a collision that would test every ounce of grit they had. 4 years before that fateful ride, near Shovel Mountain, Frank Payne was just a boy of 12 or 13. Tagging along with his father and a handful of local men from Austin. It was 1866, and they set out on a cow hunt, heading west and northwest of town to round up stray cattle. The land was a tangle of creek beds and canyons, a natural maze that swallowed herds whole. Dust kicked up under their horses' hooves as they rode, the sun high and unforgiving. This wasn't a safe errand. Even in 1866, Comanche raiding parties prowled just miles from Austin, their presence a constant thorn in the side of settlers rebuilding after the Civil War. Texas was still a frontier, and danger rode close. The group reached a limestone cliff, overlooking a stretch of meadows and a creek winding through the hill country. Payne's father reined in his horse, peering down the ridgeline below. A small band of Comanche, maybe 10 or 15, sat in a loose circle, eating what looked like a hard-earned meal. Their horses grazed nearby. Tethered to scrub, the men ducked back under cover, voices low as they debated. They couldn't let the Comanche slip away without a fight. It was a point of pride and a chance to strike back at the raiders who'd plagued their ranches. But Payne's father hesitated, glancing at his son Frank. Barely a teenager, had no gun, just a rope coiled on his saddle. "Stay put, Frank," he said, his tone sharp with worry. "Don't move until we're back." The men crept forward, rifles cocked, and then sprang their attack. Shots cracked through the air, and the Comanche scattered, leaping onto their horses and bolting down the creek bed. Hooves thundered, thus billowed, and shouts echoed off the canyon walls. Back at his spot, young Frank heard the chaos unfold. His fingers tightened on the reins. Curiosity gnawing at him, he nudged his pony forward, guiding it up the ridge for a better look. He didn't plan to join the fray, just to see it, but as he crested the hill, a riderless horse burst from the fight below, wild-eyed and charging straight at him. Frank's pony reared, then bolted, racing not back to safety, but toward the fleeing Comanche. Payne's father spun around, catching sight of his son tearing past. "Hold up, Frank! Hold up!" he yelled, voice hoarse over the din. Frank yanked at the reins, but the bit was useless. The pony had it clenched in its teeth. Unstoppable, down the slope he went, right into the Comanche's wake. The warriors wheeled their horses, startled by the lone figure barreling toward them. They took him for a gutsy attacker, not a runaway kid. Arrows flew, slicing the air around him. A lance grazed past close enough to rustle his shirt. Frank ducked low, heart pounding, as his pony weaved through the chaos. Then a sharp snap, something, maybe an arrow or a bullet, severed his bridle rein. The pony surged faster, free of control, and broke clear of the pack. Payne's father spurred his horse hard, firing at the Comanche closing in. He cut through their line, scattering the last few as Frank's pony slowed. The boy grabbed the rope from his saddle horn, leaned forward, and looped it over the horse's nose. Pulling it to a stop, he circled back, breathless, meeting his father's grim stare. 2 arrows jutted from his saddle, feathers quivering, but he was unscathed. The elder Payne holstered his gun, chest heaving, and said nothing, just nodded once, relief buried under a mask of sternness. That day stuck with Frank. Historians might call it reckless luck, but it was more than that. At 12 or 13 he'd faced death and come out grinning. A taste of the frontier's raw edge that would pull him to the Rangers. Years later the Comanche too showed their mettle, quick to fight, even against a boy they mistook for a threat. This wasn't just a skirmish. It was a glimpse of two worlds clashing. The settlers saw the Comanche as marauders, but those warriors were clinging to a way of life, already under siege by 1866. Their numbers were thinning, their raids a desperate bid to hold power. Frank's brush with them wasn't heroism or folly. It was a boy caught in history's brutal churn, a spark that would light his path to 1870. By early 1870, that spark had ignited. Frank Payne, now a weary young man in his late teens, signed on with the Texas Rangers. He landed at Camp Saba Springs, a dusty outpost near present-day Comanche, Texas, about 150 miles west of Austin. The camp was a staging ground for Rangers, keeping watch over the western frontier, a region still raw from Comanche raids and lawlessness. Payne settled in, learning the ropes alongside hardened veterans. But he didn't stay long. Word came fast. Raiding parties were hitting ranches near dripping springs, stealing horses and leaving chaos in their wake. The company packed up and headed south, cutting through the rugged hill country toward the trouble. Their path took them near Shovel Mountain, a broad rise 6 miles south of what's now Marvel Falls. In Burnett County, the Rangers, about 25 strong, rode in tight formation. Their outfits practical for the terrain. Sturdy jackets, wide hats, and boots built for rough ground. Colt revolvers hung at their hips and repeating rifles, likely Winchester Model 1866s, rested across their saddles. These weren't just tools, they were lifelines, offering firepower that could outmatch the Comanche's older muskets, and Bow's Captain Rufus Perry led the way, his sharp eyes scanning the base of the mountain. As they rounded its edge, the air was thick with heat, horses snorting as they picked through rocky soil. Then a sound broke the rhythm of hooves, a man's voice, faint at first, crying out in English the words didn't carry. But the desperation did. Perry's hand shot up. Halting, the group, riders stiffened. Ears straining, the voice grew louder, edged with panic, as they nudged their horses forward around a bend. Suddenly a figure stumbled into view. A white man, stark naked, his pale skin glaring against the brown earth. His eyes bulged wide with terror, and dried spit crusted his lips. He lurched toward them, arms flailing, as if every step might be his last. "Comanche, Comanche!" he shouted, voice shrill and clear, now cutting through the still air behind him. War whoops rose sharp and rhythmic, signaling pursuit. Perry's jaw tightened. "Steady, boys," he barked low and firm, as the man crashed into their ranks, collapsing against a horse's flank. The Rangers parted just enough to shield him, hands already on their guns. That single word, Comanche, hit like a thunderclap. It wasn't just a warning. It was a call to action, a signal that the fight they'd been hunting was now hunting them. Moments after the men tumbled into their cover, shapes emerged from the haze. Comanche warriors, about 125 strong, thundering down the slope in pursuit, their faces twisted with rage, furious at the interruption of their raid and the loss of their prize. Dust swirled as they drove about 100 stolen horses ahead of them, the herd slowing in the rough, rocky terrain near Shovel Mountain's base. The Rangers gripped their reins, watching the enemy close in. But then the tide shifted. The Comanche spotted the armed riders, and their momentum faltered. Horses skidded to a stop, warriors yanking reins hard. With a flurry of shouts, they turned west, urging the herd into a frantic retreat. Hunters now turned prey. Perry saw the opening. "Flank 'em, right move," he snapped, voice cutting through the clamor. The Rangers veered sharply, sticking close to the brush for cover. They wove through scrub and cedar, hooves pounding until they neared the struggling herd. Then with a sudden burst they charged out. Rifles raised, aiming to cut the horses off at a narrow pinch in the landscape. The Comanche yelled, trying to wheel their mounts, but the Rangers pressed hard. They split the herd from its captors, driving the animals south toward the foot of Shovel Mountain. Horses whinnied, kicking up clouds of dirt. As they funneled into the tight space, 3 Rangers peeled off, ropes in hand to hold the herd in place. The rest tightened their circle, boxing the horses against the mountain slope. The maneuver was slick, born from Perry's years of frontier scraps. The Comanche scattered in the chaos of chasing. The settler hadn't expected this bolt.